Hi, this is Danny Ryan, VP of Business Development for ThreeWill, and I'm here with Chris Edwards. Chris is a Senior Software Engineer for ThreeWill. Thanks for coming and doing this, Chris.
Hey, thanks. Glad to be here.
Chris has helped out with a lot of our migrations and recently wrote a blog post on the 5 critical mistakes that you don't want to make when you're migrating to SharePoint 2013. So I wanted to take a little bit of time out of his busy day and just sort of go through that blog post and cover those 5 things. Tell me a little bit more about things you've been doing recently, sort of things that have led up to writing this blog post.
Sure. So more recently, I've been doing a lot of things really with a lot of our internal stuff, taking things from SharePoint, our own internal SharePoint extranet, and pushing them out to Office 365. So kind of learning a lot of lessons about how to actually do that properly, or maybe not so properly, but learning the lessons and dealing with the fallout from that. So also been doing some work, both internal and external, with moving Jive customers to Office 365 and to SharePoint in general. So learned quite a few things about how to make that work and try to do a good job with that.
Awesome, very cool. So you had you'd gone through and sort of looked at 5 mistakes that people had made. The first one that you point out is a lack of knowledge of the product and platform or changes that have to do with that. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that if you're not aware, like of SharePoint 2013, there's some things that that there's quite a substantial difference from its previous version. Things like the datasheet view. People that are used to working with SharePoint, used to more of an Excel-like experience working with lists and things like that. Mm-hmm. They may expect that datasheet view to just be the exact same in 2013. Well, it's not quite the same thing. It's a little different. They've made it better in the sense that it supports more browsers, but the whole copy-paste concept of working with Excel and dealing with it like it was previously, it's not quite the same experience.
Gotcha.
And it kind of throws people off a little bit. Other things like the app, more of an app-centric model, things are more App Store-ish, that type of kind of feel to it in SharePoint 2013. Even lists, even custom lists are now apps. So just, people aren't necessarily familiar with that. It's a little different paradigm.
Gotcha.
And another big one, I would say, is the search. Search is vastly improved, I would say, in the new version of SharePoint. But its configuration is quite a bit different. So there's a learning curve to go through and understand how to deal with that configuration. And the reason why I put that in this post is that you really need to spend time to understand that first before you just attempt to try and migrate to SharePoint 2013. Without just understanding it, you could migrate and then be in a situation where you don't understand how to configure it properly and confuse your users. So that's really, it's just making people aware that they need to invest some time into understanding the differences and why what they're really accomplishing by moving to 2013.
That's great. And I also saw that you put a more detailed list in the post as well.
That's
People
great.
wanted to go find some more about more details, and including the ones that you had covered.
Yes.
Now, the next one that you have is incorrect hosting choice. Tell me more about that one.
Yeah, so the thought on the incorrect hosting choice is, it's really that question, the bigger question of should I be on premises or should I be in the cloud? Should I go ahead and move to Office 365? Mm-hmm. And I think there seems to be some misunderstanding in terms of when I go to Office 365, what do I give up? Am I giving up security? Am I giving up the ability to control things? Yes and no. But I think with the hesitation of some of those questions and thinking through those questions, I've seen people make the choice to go to an on-premises solution when they really need to be considering some of the really nice features that Microsoft's rolling out with Office 365 and some of the cool new stuff that they're continuing to enhance the product by in that particular world. So I would encourage folks to check out more of what Office 365 has to offer and don't just get kind of bogged down into do I have control or not. Yes, you do have control. Do you have as much control as you used to? No. And there's actually some more detail on that type of conversation in the new business operating system white paper that we put out there.
Right.
So you guys can take a look at that if you want to find more detail on that kind of conversation.
I guess this is also where where hybrid comes into play too, where you may have a little bit of each. Or
Exactly.
yeah.
I bring this into play just because you really want to think through making a wise choice on where to host. Don't just assume I had on-premises before, I need to go ahead and do the same thing again. It's really a good time to make a proper choice.
And I know for some other clients that we've actually guided them through that whole process of deciding.
Right. Exactly.
And there's even decisions if you're deciding to go all cloud that you need to make.
Right.
So it's not as straightforward sometimes as you might expect it to be. Now the next one that you have is not properly identifying customizations. What's that all about?
That's more of the kind of the physical aspect of if I want to upgrade from, like, say, SharePoint 2010 or SharePoint 2007 to 2013, or you just want to get things kind of moved up the upgrade path. It's very easy to overlook or to just kind of like leave things, maybe old stale content, things like that in place. Mm-hmm. I've seen this happen where you may have some old connector type, some old web parts or some old things kind of lingering around. They make their way into SharePoint 2013, and then it's stuff that's there in the list. It's just confusing to people. Yep. It's just lingering things that you can potentially get away with, but it ends up becoming part of your system of record basically in 2013 and can cause problems. Typically, when you're dealing with those, SharePoint 2013 does a good job of blocking you and not letting you upgrade. But things do get through, and you can confuse people if you don't try to plan for and account for those customizations properly.
Is there a way you can go see what customizations have been made?
Yeah, there's actually, the blog post itself talks about a PowerShell command. It's called test SP content database. It does some basic testing to say, okay, here's some customizations that are in place that I'm not aware of. I can't find. I can't resolve. Basically, I've got a web part. I can't resolve where it lives in your system. I'm going to report that to you. So there's an example of how you'd go after that. Maybe a feature has been installed in the old version of SharePoint, and you try to bring it over in the new one. It doesn't know how to find that. That particular PowerShell command that's referenced in the blog post as well will show you that kind of stuff.
Now the next one has to do with where your users are managed and not establishing an authoritative identity store. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so this is more of that kind of that hybrid question as well. Do you want your users to be only on premises, only in your own company domain Active Directory? Maybe that's what you want. Or do you want them to live in the cloud, maybe in Azure AD? Or do you want a combination of the two? It's very similar to what we talked about earlier with choosing the right hosting provider,
Gotcha.
choosing the hosting. So it's just making sure you understand kind of where the users live. I know we made a mistake is where we set up our users independently, and then we tried to set up email after doing that, and then we ended up finding we needed to kind of go back and redo that operation. So you want to avoid those kind of redos, if you will, of setting up users. Making a mistake of trying to migrate. Oh, I found out that these users are trying to come over again a second time, and therefore just creating duplicates. There's little mechanical things that confuse people and just slow down the whole process.
At least we did this when we were moving over and not for someone else.
Yep. So
very cool. Now the last one that you have in here is a lack of communication preparation. What have you seen there?
This is kind of a general, kind of a catch-all. Is that, if you're moving, a company or corporate SharePoint, or some sort of system of record into SharePoint 2013, you really want to let people know kind of what's going on, and give them a chance to back up their content or to be aware that their content's going to be moving. I've seen situations where there's a deadline. People have. The IT shop has to get things moved over, and they don't necessarily communicate as best possible. And even if they do the best job possible of moving this content, making it work, if people aren't comfortable with where it's going and aren't familiar with it, could cause a project to fail. So it's just making sure that everyone is on board. You're dealing with a lot of people's content, a lot of people's stuff. So it's just making sure that the trust level stays.
Great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to do this. And just a reminder to all our listeners, we actually have a webinar that's coming up on April 17th that Chris and I will be having similar conversation to this, and love for you to join us there. You can register for that by going to 3will.com/calendar. Thanks so much again, Chris, for your time.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.